Okay, I think that, tell you what, the entrants are slowing down a little bit, so let's go ahead and get started. So, as I said, this is our seventh session of these distance learning ideas from the field webinars. I really appreciate, I know at this point, a lot of you I recognize have attended multiple webinars. So hopefully that means that these are helpful and useful to you. Just kind of a little bit about some of the changes that we've made along the way is we've kind of gone back through and started pulling out the resources that people identified during the webinar and putting together a resource sheet that comes out at the with the follow-up email. We've been loading some of those resources onto ProLiteracy Education Network. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. But just to kind of answer the questions that I know you guys have. So we are recording the webinar. There'll be a follow-up email that comes out on Monday. It'll have a link to the recording. It'll have links to any of the websites that get mentioned during the webinar. Typically what we've been doing now is pulling those out and putting them on a resource page. It'll have a link to the PowerPoint slides that Gwen and Soyla are using today. So they've agreed to share those. And then we've also started including a transcript of the chat and a spreadsheet file of the Q&A session. So you can go back through and look and see what questions and what things people said and kind of follow those as well. And there'll be a link to a certificate for you because we know a lot of folks are using these for professional development. Once again, we're going to ask that you use the chat for just kind of general comments. I see that a lot of people, when they sign in, kind of identify where they're from, and we've got people from all over the country, which is wonderful. Use the chat to let us know about any technical issues you're having, if sound is cutting in and out, or you can't see the screen, something like that, and we will try to address those during the workshop. The chat room is also where we will post links to websites that come up during the presentation. So you can link to them there a little bit easier. And also it's easier for us to pull them out and put them on the resource sheet. We're going to ask that any questions you have for about the content, about what Gwen and Soyla are sharing today, that you use the Q&A function to ask those questions. That just helps us. It's a little bit easier functionality to help us keep track of what questions have been asked and answered. And we will, for those of you who are not familiar with kind of how this works, they've got a presentation that'll go for about 20-30 minutes, so about half of the webinar. And then we'll spend the second half kind of using your questions to interview them, ask them questions. They'll respond. They've agreed to kind of keep the time after the top of the hour free. So we'll basically end the webinar, but we'll continue to go through all of the questions until they've been answered and addressed. And that way, when you get the recording, even if you had to get off at 3 o'clock or 2 o'clock or whenever whatever your time zone is, you can listen to the end of that webinar and hear the answers to your questions. We are doing these webinars weekly. We're still going strong. Although I kind of feel like at this point, people might be kind of shifting back to try to figure out how we're going to reopen. So we've got 3 more scheduled, and then I think we may take a week or 2 to kind of survey the field and see where people are and if they need to continue to work on learning how to do distance learning, or if they need kind of guidance on opening back up, or maybe both. So we may take a couple of week break, do some surveying, and then get these back going if they need to continue along this same vein or kind of change around. And I think we'll probably do a couple of surveys or polls in our next a couple of webinars that we do. So you see coming up, we've got another program from Texas, Tyler, Texas. We've got Literacy Source from Seattle, and then we've got Washtenaw Literacy that's going to be doing a presentation. And we have had some requests, a lot of questions about working in corrections, and we're putting together kind of a special webinar around working in corrections facilities and doing distance learning in those facilities. I'm talking to folks right now. We're going to try to put together a panel of about 3 or 4 programs to talk about what they're doing. And then again, much like this one, have an opportunity to ask questions and other people share what they're doing. So keep your eyes out. Next couple of weeks, we'll probably be having an announcement about that one. And it may be on a Friday, it may be scheduled at a different time. So we'll keep you posted, but we'll give you a couple of weeks warning. As I was saying, ProLiteracy Education Network. So that's where we're posting a lot of the, we're posting the recordings. One of the places we're posting the recordings, as well as a lot of the resources that come up. So you can go to proliteracyednet.org. That's kind of our page. If you're not familiar with what ProLiteracy Education Network is, you can find out more about it. You can create an account there. You can log in from there. And then once you create an account and log in, you get on that welcome page and you'll see a big banner across the top that says Distance Learning Resources. You click on that banner and it'll take you right to where all of those resources are that have come up during these webinars, as well as some additional things that we've come across in our just kind of reading about what people are doing. Okay, so having covered all of that, that's enough of me. And I'm going to turn things over to Gwen and Soyla from Literacy Lubbock. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And Gwen, you guys can take over.
Okay, thank you, Todd. We'll take just one moment here to get our things up. Okay. So yes, definitely. Thank you, Todd and ProLiteracy for the chance to present today. My name is Gwen Moore. At Literacy Lubbock, my main duties relate to student and volunteer management in our adult education programs. My background before I came to Literacy Lubbock was in international education administration and in volunteer management. Joining me today is Soyla Castillo. Soyla works on site at one of our GED tutoring locations. She coaches both students and tutors. She is a retired educator with 33 years of experience. So she will be sharing with you some of the strategies that she uses for online tutoring and will also be available for questions. I'd like to start by telling you a little bit about Lubbock and our organization. Many of you have probably never heard of Lubbock before. We are there at the bottom of the panhandle of Texas. We're a medium-sized city. There are about 260,000 people living in the city and more than 300,000 living within our county. We are anchored by universities, agriculture, and the healthcare industry. It's important to note, just relevant to our conversation today, that our COVID-19 numbers have been relatively low. We've had 680 total cases. That was the official number as of yesterday, with 162 active cases right now. And I think that's a pretty accurate number because testing here is currently very accessible. We've had, unfortunately, 50 deaths, but no deaths in over 2 weeks. So I know that the landscape here is very different from where some of you are from. We're a small community nonprofit. We have 3 full-time staff. We also have 3 part-time staff supporting GED and 2 part-time staff for ESL. We offer, for adult education, GED tutoring, ESL classes and tutoring, and adult basic education. So that's primarily teaching people how to read, but we work with students on whatever needs they bring to us. We also have family literacy programs. We do a story time in collaboration with our local libraries and a local nonprofit daycare. We also do family literacy events with other nonprofit partners and Barnes & Noble throughout the year. We don't own or rent any facilities. We rely on our partnerships with community and faith-based organizations to provide space for our programs. So I wanted to mention that because as we make decisions about how we reopen and things, we're never making those decisions on our own. That's with our partners who actually own the facilities. We have about 400 students a year who access our adult programs. For these programs that we're discussing today, I have about 40 active volunteers at any given time. We do have a local state-supported adult education center in Lubbock. So what we offer is a less formal alternative to their services. So we are focused on flexibility for students. We have free registration. It's open enrollment, so students can join the program at any time. There's no mandatory attendance, but students are encouraged to attend as much as they can. We're also flexible with volunteers, so they aren't required to have special credentials, although some have teaching experience, and at least one of our ESL volunteers has a TESOL certification. So that's some general information about us. How we normally operate before the COVID crisis. All of our programs have been in person. So our GED program normally runs on a drop-in basis at 4 locations around Lubbock. We have daytime hours on weekdays. We do evenings, Monday through Thursday, and then we have 1 session on Saturday morning. So during those times, we actually have volunteer tutors who are physically on site, and then students can drop in. They don't need an appointment and can meet one-on-one with that tutor. So it's all student driven. The students tell us what they need to study, which is usually guided by practice testing. We pay for students to take 2 of the official GED ready tests. We like that because it provides a good study plan. Tutors have the discretion to use classroom and online resources that they see fit for helping the students. We want to make sure that everything is really tailored to the individual student needs. But most of our tutors really prefer working from the Kaplan GED Prep Guide. So we recommend that particular guide to our student, but it's optional. We do subsidize the cost of the book for those students who want to purchase it. We also purchase a limited number of GED Flash accounts. That is by Aztec Software, and that provides online flashcards for GED. So as students request those, and we will give them a seat for that, and that's a good way for them to study when they're not coming to tutoring. Our ESL services are primarily given as classes with 2 main multi-level class times twice a week, 1 daytime and 1 evening. And those classes use a specified curriculum according to the student level. So in one of those classes, we're using the Pearson side-by-side curriculum, and in the other, we are using Confidence and Connections, which is by Intercambio, which is a community organization in Boulder. So students in those classes do pay for those books, but we also subsidize the cost of that for them as well. Our goal is to make it as easy as possible for students to attend. We have additional classes throughout the week at varying levels. Placement isn't strict. I do an informal assessment with intake, and I suggest students to go to particular classes, but normally what students will end up doing is going to a class that fits their schedule the best. So all of our classes in a way end up being multi-level. So we try to have, besides the instructor, at least one more additional volunteer so that they can help the instructor deal with that multi-level environment. We have 2 weekly conversation groups. Those are not lesson focused. They're really just focused on students meeting each other and practicing conversation. One of those is focused on leadership. And then for our adult basic education, that is all one-on-one tutoring. So that is not drop-in. That those students are matched with the volunteer tutor for typically a long-term commitment. That will be learning to read. Some people come to us to learn basic math or to raise their scores for some kind of vocational testing or college entrance testing. So that's what we were doing before. Of course, we experienced very sudden closures like everyone else did. And so to provide some background how we made our decisions, the assumptions going in, as far as duration, the assumption, at least my assumption, was that closures would likely last 3 to 4 weeks. We all know that was kind of a pipe dream that it would be so short. We also assumed that many of our volunteers and students wouldn't be inclined to use video meetings, either because of their comfort with technology or their access. So as far as priorities, our main priority was to get something up quickly. We didn't want students to lose momentum, especially our GED students. It's always difficult to retain those students over time anyways. We wanted to give students options to study while at home. And we wanted to let students know that we are really behind them. We want them to succeed. We want to keep them encouraged. So the first thing that we did that was really what we could get pushed out the fastest, and that was promoting online resources to students. So we already had a Weebly site that I had put together for our volunteers. So it's meant to be resources for them if they're looking for something to use with the student. This is where they can go to find material. So taking that idea, we created pages for students. So a lot of the volunteer and student content overlaps, but for the student pages, I definitely took off anything that I thought might be too complicated for them to navigate through to get to the information they need. And the aim for this is to provide what we think are the top free resources. So it's not an exhaustive list by any means, but it's not meant to be. It's meant to be more curated than that. So I have just a few screenshots here. You're welcome to check out the site and we can look at it more during the Q&A if someone wants to do that. But you can see we have a page for GED students, ESL students, and then volunteers can use the More tab to navigate to pages for them, including training and development, and then links to our main Literacy Lubbock public site and Facebook. The ESL student resource page, if you were to scroll down, you would see more links to apps or to lessons. GED resources, we have our tutoring schedule. We definitely want to get them into tutoring, but then it follows with other resources for them as well. So for our GED, that we got that going very quickly into remote tutoring. So within a week, we had a schedule sorted. So the way it works, a student contacts me. They can do that through our office voicemail. We set up a tutoring phone number in Google Voice. They can contact me by email or via an interest form on our website. And then I act as a dispatcher. So I find out where they are in the process, what they need to study, when they're available, and whether they have a device, an internet connection that they can use for a video meeting. And at that point, I'll also register them if they haven't done that step already. I have tutors who were all recruited pre-crisis, who agreed to be on call while we were closed. They sign up for 1 regular shift per week, so they serve the same shift every week. With this, we've managed to have an on-call schedule covering all the hours that we previously served in person. That was important to me so that we could make that as seamless as possible for students who were attending before so that they could keep coming at the same time. The initial idea was that students would call during the tutoring hours and I'd connect them with a tutor right away. In that way, we could maintain our drop-in service. And definitely some students do that, but I'm finding that the majority who call don't want tutoring right that minute. They haven't really set aside time for it. They're just calling to get more information. So in that case, I make appointments for them for tutoring a day or 2 in advance. If I match a student and volunteer who can both video chat, then I host a Zoom meeting. We use a pro account. That way we don't have any sort of time limit. I do have 1 tutor and student who've met twice by phone. So neither one of them had video access, and so they actually met just by voice. And they did math tutoring very successfully. I heard that both from the student and the tutor that they thought it went really well. They did that by using the same book. So they had the same Kaplan GED study book, and they were looking at the same lessons and questions together. So that made it easy for them to be in the same place and to talk about math problems. A note about the tutoring line and why we chose Google Voice. We use G Suite for our normal operations, so it was really simple to add it on. It's $10 per month per user. I had also used it in a previous job, so I already was comfortable with it and understood it. For people who don't know, you can easily add other staff to the same line so that calls and texts can be directed to a personal phone, or can be managed on a computer, and you can change who's in charge with that at different times. It also has a do not disturb setting, which was really important. I've been very grateful for that a few times. One student pocket dialed me at 1 a.m. and I was very glad that I didn't know she had called me until the next morning. For our ESL, most of our services have been individual tutoring with tutors and students who I matched to study together over time, and then they manage their schedule and decide how they meet. So they decide on a platform that works for the both of them. To facilitate that, I did deliver curriculum to some pairs, but others are working from their own lesson plans that the tutors created based on the students' needs. I also host drop-in conversation groups using Zoom. And we can talk more later about tools I've used for that if people have questions about that. I do think there's more information online these days about ESL than GED, so we're really focusing on the GED. We've also had scheduled classes, and this was something that a few of our instructors took the initiative to do. It wasn't something I really felt comfortable asking our volunteers to do. Everything closed so suddenly, and I know we all had a little bit of chaos in our lives, and so I didn't feel it was appropriate for me to ask them to suddenly move their classes online and to do the training and all the work that it would take to do that. And also, I really didn't think we'd be closed long enough to make it worth it. But we were very lucky that instructors for 2 of our classes took the initiative and started meeting their classes online. So one of those is an advanced class, and so that instructor used primarily conversation. The students themselves really keep a lot of that going on, and then he uses the chat box to spell things out and correct students. The other class used email to collect homework, to send homework and collect homework. They were an intermediate level, and so those instructors were going more from lesson plans. We also originally offered correspondence with the idea that we could make packets for students to pick up and drop off, but we really didn't get much response to that, and that could be partly just how we communicated with students, because this was email communication. So if students were getting our messages, then they could probably do the online tutoring. You'll notice that our basic education isn't listed on there. That part of our programming is very small. It's really about 5 students at any given time. And the feedback I got from those volunteers when we closed led me to just say, let's put this on hold. But that's something I'm looking to restart now. We have used Zoom as our primary platform, like many other people around the country. I wanted to share the website that I found most helpful as far as training, teachertrainingvideos.com. I found the videos very helpful and very accessible. There's instructions on how to use Zoom features, but also how you can use Zoom features with specific content ideas. So I found that really helpful and used some of those ideas. The main features that we use are the chat box, the screen sharing. Whiteboard is part of the screen sharing. When tutors log on for the first time, I show them quickly how to use those. And one of the things I like about Zoom is it's quickly to figure out how to use those features. A lot of our tutors use screen sharing. Soyla will show you how she uses it. I know that some people go to sites with their students like Khan Academy to watch some videos together or to do other practice. One strategy I wanted to share, a math tutor shared with me that he has logged in before using both his computer and his phone. So he logged in on 2 devices so that he could use his phone camera to share handwritten notes during the session. With the computer, he's able to do the screen sharing. So in that way, he's able to use more than one feature at a time. And he likes how that works. One of the challenges with Zoom is that you can only host 1 meeting at a time. And we often have tutoring pairs that are meeting concurrently or meeting on top of one of our ESL conversation groups. So in those cases, I use breakout rooms to separate people. If I only have 1 tutor and volunteer who need a meeting, then often what I do is go ahead and make the tutor the host. You can change the host from yourself to another person attending. So I'll make the tutor the host, and then I can disconnect and go on with my other tasks. Originally, I used a different link for each meeting because of information that I think we all heard about Zoom bombing. But it became a real nuisance to create new meetings all the time and to make sure people were getting the correct links. So now I use recurring links, but I have a different one for each day. So in that way, if it happens that a meeting is hacked, if someone gets the link out there, then it's only going to mess up part of the schedule, and I can quickly get new links out to the few people who will need them. So that's just a little bit of mitigation I did there. And now Soyla is going to share some of the specific tools that she has used to do online tutoring with GED students.
Thank you, Gwen. Good afternoon. I'm the site manager for one of our GED locations, and normally I'm just responsible for attendance records, helping students log in so they can take their get ready pre-test. So we can design a lesson plan for them. I provide handouts for the tutors. I manage what goes on with the students and the tutors, but occasionally I do tutor language arts and social studies. And so when Gwen called me and said, we're going to go online, would you be interested, since we don't have a site, but would you be interested in, someone says, I sound like a drum. I'm sorry if the noise is there. But anyway, I said, yeah, as long as I can tutor language arts or social studies, I'd be happy. And so being a bilingual ESL teacher, I will also give some tips that I do because we do have students that are not only GU students, but they're ESL, and they're also working for their GED. When I started, first thing I thought was, well, what am I going to use? Because we left the building during spring break and it was going to be closed and I didn't have any resources at home. And so Gwen said, well, I'll just take you a book and I'll leave it on your porch. And I was, oh, this is wonderful. And so she literally did. She came and dropped it off on my porch, and she made sure our students had books too, so we could be on one-on-one with each other. And that was really helpful. But unfortunately, I had a student, one of my students that I was tutoring, that the book was not going to be beneficial because it was way above her reading level. And so I thought, well, what am I going to do? So I went to the GED website and I looked immediately to see if there was something that I could use that was much lower level, but there wasn't. But I did see something that I wanted to mention to you. So Gwen, I don't know if you can click on the GED website, if you'll do that really quickly, I can show them. There's and go down where it says COVID-19, just a little bit down, you'll scroll down just a little bit. Fast Forward is an online course program that they've partnered with the GED for free access. If you'll see that, for free access till June the 30th. And this might be very beneficial. We have a student who just needs one more test. And since we're all going online, I thought, oh, we might need to get her on this test, on the math test, and do this online learning for her. It's just for 4 more weeks, and hopefully that'll get her ready to take the test. So just wanted to throw that out there. So those of you, if you have anybody that could benefit from 4 weeks of free online learning, that's there available. And it's through the official GED website. Thank you. And then, so I don't just want to work with the book. I'm thinking, what else can I use? And so we, like Gwen mentioned, we do have GED Flash accounts that we give to the students so they can get free extra practice. And I said, well, I'm going to use that. And actually, I really like it because the passages are really small. I call them bite-sized mini quizzes, and there's only 10 questions. And so for my students that are struggling with reading and literacy skills, I use that. I make them log in and share their screen. And what I do is I model the reading thinking aloud strategy. And I've given them a think aloud checklist that I found through the readingrockets.org. And I will give the link to Todd so he can send that out. It's a really good website checklist that lists the kind of strategies that a good reader does when they're reading for meaning, and then a column where you could tally. So if I'm modeling, I'm reading the passage, I'm modeling what I'm doing. For example, if I'm predicting, I use sentence starter like, I predict that, or in the next part I think, or if I'm summarizing, I'll say the most important thing, idea I got right now is, or if I'm just making a connection, I'll say, oh, this reminds me of. So I literally think out loud as I'm reading the passage because it's very short. And so I want to model for them what a good reader does when they read. And they have the checklist also, tally marks when they see what I'm doing out loud. And then they also have to go and do another practice passage, and I listen to them, and I want them to think out loud, and then I model, to model for me, and I'll check checklist to tally mark. And so I'm just trying to raise their literacy levels of reading, so not so much test prep skills yet, because we just have students that are need that first along with the test prep. And I also show them how I do the elimination for answer choices and think aloud, so we can get help with there. So I really like the GED Flash for that, So it's short, mini-sized quizzes, 10 questions, instant feedback. When I show them how I found that I think this is the right answer, but let's see if I got it right. And then it's their turn, so we take turns, and all the while they're using their account, but when they can share it on the screen, I can walk along with them. So it's been really fun to do that, just something different from the book. Something else I use is because we have online, we're all online, I went and I searched for as many free practice online tests on each subject, reading, math, science, and social studies. And you can see an example. I put all the links on a PDF file and I sent it to the students. Hey, look, when we're not tutoring, please take a few minutes to go and find a practice test. You don't have to do all of it. You can do a few, but on a daily basis, practice, practice, practice. The more you practice looking at the types of questions you're going to get, the more you practice answering to see if you got it right or wrong, it's going to give you that practice that you're going to need. So I will make those available also. I'll give them the PDF files to Todd. I had a student who was going to take the test right before COVID, and then they shut the site down, the test site down, and so they rescheduled her to take the test in May. And so when she came on in April, when we started our tutoring, she said, I really don't need tutoring. I just want to just really review, because she had been with us already several months. And I said, well, yeah, let's review. And I said, you know what, let's use Quizlet. And I said, let's just go look at the terms that I think you really need to know for this test. And so I went to Quizlet, and right now they're having free access also till June. And I know some of you use it, but I went and searched for GED terms, and there were a lot of people that had already made some card sets, and I was very grateful for that. It saves me a lot of time. But one of the features of Quizlet is if you like someone's sets, you can go ahead and export them and import them into your account, and that way you can edit, you can change, etc. And so that's what I did. Gwen, if you go scroll back to maybe the first card, if that'll let you.
Oops.
What I've done is I changed my card just for ESL and people who are teaching. Oops, did it? Maybe you can get out of that.
It may have let me see all that I can see without an account. I think that may be the issue. I'll try again.
Okay, thank you. For ESL students, it's very important that we provide visuals and simplify definitions. So those are two features that you can also get on Quizlet. And so what I did with my reading terms, I added a picture and I simplified the definition, but I added one more thing on my own, and that was I put test question prompts, like this is how you're going to see it asked on the test, on the GED test, and so they can see that. So we practiced with those cards for a good 2 weeks, so she could really understand all the concepts and the terms that she was going to see on the test. And I'm happy to say that it helped her, and she passed the test. And we were so excited. She called me with some tears and saying, "I did it! I did it!" And I knew she was, but I just thought this was just the perfect tool to use for review. And the last thing I want to share with you is, the student who had really low literacy skills, I needed to find some material online, because I didn't want to have to be, mailing worksheets or downloading Google Docs or anything like that. I just wanted something online where the students could pull up and let's read together and let's work on fluency. So when you go to Newsela, this is also free for until June the 30th. And if you browse the content, these are articles, and they're always adding new ones every week. And what I really like about it is that when you go into, can you get on that, Gwen?
Yeah, I'm sorry. It looks like their website is having some sort of problem.
Oh no, okay. Well, I'll just.
The page isn't loading.
Okay, that's fine. Oh, it's breaking up?
Yeah, it just isn't loading at all.
Okay, well, when you click on an article, it gives you the option to change the Lexile level. So you can move it from the lowest reading level, which is 610, up to the highest, the max, and 1200. And so for my student, I really needed like the middle school level and like 8th grade level reading. And I was able to do that on that website. and I let her pick the article she wanted. I make sure we had the right lexile, and I asked her, I just want you to read. I just want you to read, because I learned from the GED website that most of the average article size is 500 to 700 words. It takes about a minute to read 100 words. So basically, our students have to read those passages within 5 to 7 minutes. And so I wanted to know, how fast does she read that? So I took a passage and I said, I want you just to read it. Don't worry about messing up or anything, just read as best you can. And it was taking her about 10 to 12 minutes to read. And so I was looking at what she was doing wrong when reading, and it was basically word attack skills, and she had very poor fluency. And I was okay, so we're going to work on fluency and your word attack skills, because that's what's holding you up, and even decoding skills. And I used that for those articles for that, because I can differentiate for different levels, and that's really good for ELLs too, for English learners. If you want them to read, always tell them that you can change it to different levels. And along with that, something that I do also when we read the articles or any passage, even from the Kaplan prep book, they know that they're going to have to share their screen and click on that text box, and they're going to have to do a reader's response, a reflection of what they just read. And so I gave them a list of sentence starters, such as the most important thing I learned, or something I didn't understand, or the part that stood out for me the most was, etc. Or maybe even for more of a GD focus in the fiction, I said the point of view of the author is, or 3 words that describe the main character, I think are, and this is why. And so I make them reflect 1 or 2 sentences on when they share their screen using that text box. And what I'm looking for, and I tell them, just write and just give me a reflection of what are you thinking. Don't worry about grammar or spelling or anything. Just write, and just 1 or 2 sentences. I don't want an essay. I just want a couple of sentences. But what I'm looking for is, I am looking for grammar errors, and I am looking for syntax, and I'm looking for, especially for academic language. Because before we get with some student, before we're even ready for an essay, I want to make sure that they know the difference between social and academic language. And so I have them write 1 sentence. For example, I had this student, we were reading a story about Obama's portraits being hung at the nation's capital. And I said, okay, now write me 1 sentence about what you just read. Kind of give me the whole idea, the main idea. And she wrote, and I said, write it on the text box so I can see it written. And she wrote, I learned about that people go see the picture of President Obama at a museum. And I said, okay, now I want you to go and circle the word people. And she's doing that, the person that's writing. Circle the word people, circle the word picture, and circle the word museum. And those 3 words, I want you to go back to the article, and I want you to find the words that mean the same thing, but they're straight from the article. So instead of people, she crossed it out and put visitors. And instead of picture, she crossed it out and put portrait. And of course, instead of the museum, she wrote the name of the museum, which was the Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery. And I said, okay, now I want you to read that. And so when we looked at the first way she wrote it, and then we looked at the second way she wrote it, she saw, oh, it sounds so much better. And I said, yeah, but this is social language, and that's academic language, and it's all about word choice. And so I tell her, we're going to do that every time, because when we get ready to write our extended response essay, you're going to know when I say, oh, this needs to sound more academic, so let's change the word choice. So it's just a little practice, and some students need a beginning start instead of saying, oh, let's write our 5-paragraph essay. No, we need to start with some students, especially if they're ELLs, English learners, we need to start slowly. And so that's a tip that I wanted to share with you. And that's all I had to share. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Soyla. Before we talk about reopening, I just wanted to touch on other strategies that we used to get students participating. For ESL, we didn't really have a problem. Student demand really met our capacity. But in our GED program, there was literally a week when I didn't have a single student who accessed our tutoring. So I did lots of phoning and texting students. to encourage them and just sometimes just to check in on them and talk with them. We also did give away some GED test vouchers to students who we knew were close to testing, to encourage them to go ahead and schedule the test so that they would get real fired up about attending tutoring and getting ready for the test date. Our development director came up with a great plan. She solicited donor funds to purchase restaurant gift cards that we then gave to students. So that was a way that we could support local restaurants during this closure. They can still do takeout and delivery. And so we're helping them out and helping the students out by making their week a little bit easier, providing some food for them. I also reached out to a couple of foster agencies in town that have group homes to see if they needed tutors for their high school students, because I knew that our volunteers would be very capable of helping them. That did yield a couple of students. One was actually a GED student who had been coming to us before, but she wasn't using the remote tutoring until we reached out. The other had been put on a self-directed online program by her high school and was actually getting no teacher or tutoring help during the day. It was really all self-directed and she was overwhelmed. So for that student in particular, I think the timing of our intervention turned out to be very significant. And actually, as of this morning, she has officially graduated high school. So we are very, very proud of her. So 2 students doesn't seem like much, but they did utilize our volunteers quite a bit. So we felt good about that, meeting a need in the community. And now that we have the connections with the foster agencies, it leaves a pathway to partner with them in future, which, you know, could be important. If you don't know already, nationally, only about 50% of children in the foster system will graduate from high school. So as far as reopening, 2 of our locations have reopened to the public, but we really didn't want people rushing back in. So we did kind of a soft opening. We didn't actually let our students know that those sites were open immediately. We are continuing online tutoring indefinitely, and we consider that our primary service for safety and practical reasons. If students are unable to use the online tutoring, either because of accessibility or it isn't meeting their need for some reason, then they can make an appointment to do an in-person tutoring session. But that is with all the safety guidelines in place that you would imagine. We're also opening a new study lab at one of our main sites, and the original plan for that was to have something like 6 or 7 workstations. Instead, we're putting in fewer workstations and really spacing them further apart. So as far as our new priorities, it's really getting our adult basic education back on track. Too many B's there. Creating more ESL online groups and getting more volunteers so that we can get our inactive students back into ESL. Definitely contingency planning to be better prepared for future closures, and that will include additional training for volunteers and students so that they know how to use video meetings and we can increase their comfort level with it. And Todd had also asked me if we were thinking about distance learning for the long term. I would say it's possible. I would definitely look to our board for that. If we were to have distance learning and in-person classes running consecutively for the long term, I think we would need more capacity based on the experience that I'm having now to manage the logistics and to make sure the instructors have enough support. So that is the information that we have to present, and we're happy to be available for questions.
Thank you so much, Gwen and, Gwen and Soyla. And Soyla, just to let you know, if you're not following the chat, a lot of people really appreciated your tip about social language versus academic language. They thought that was a fantastic tutoring tip. So I suspect we're going to see a lot of that getting used with students and in classrooms in the near future.
Great.
So just to start the questions, we had a lot of questions in the beginning. I think as you were kind of going through the different materials that you use with your high school equivalency students, your ESL students, people weren't catching them all, and I know they'll be in the recording, but I wondered if you could just give a quick rundown of what those materials are that you're using with each group again.
Okay, so, and Soyla can help me out here. In our GED program, we definitely use the Kaplan GED prep guide a lot. Our students really like that. Our tutors like it. It covers all 4 subjects of the GED really well. And also has, if you purchase the book, there are some online modules that you can access as well. Definitely Khan Academy is a website that our tutors and students like. GED Flash, which Soyla also talked about. That is, the company is Aztec, Aztec software. That is, I guess, groups, you can think of it as flashcard sets. That's how I would describe it. So it's basically digital sets of flashcards that are written in line with the GED testing companies so that students can practice questions in the same way that they're written for the test. Soyla, you had the others that you really like to use for GED?
Oh, yeah. The Newsela, the Quizlet.com.
Yeah, those are really good ones as well. And feel free to access that resources website that we made for our students and volunteers. The website, and I'm sure it'll be sent out in the follow-up information also. It's www.llresources.weebly.com. So that LL is for Literacy Lubbock. For our ESL, the 2 different curricula that we use the Pearson side-by-side. So Pearson is the company that publishes those books. The other curriculum that we use is called Confidence and Connections. And it is a relatively new curriculum that is published by Intercambio United Communities, and they are out of Boulder, Colorado.
Okay, actually, I wanted to follow up with some questions that they had about other materials. They're asking if you use reworks.org, Procon, and Read Theory. Do you use any of those?
Those are not websites that I'm familiar with.
No, I don't use those.
Okay, great.
Gwen, it's Robin. You mentioned earlier that you do an informal assessment at intake for new students. Could you talk more about how you do that, what it looks like in the days of COVID, and what reading assessment you are using? Thank you.
Yes, so when students register, I email them back. Usually email is the way I go, since I know that a lot of students know how to use like Google Translate or another translator. So if they don't read well in English, then they can put it into a translator and we can still communicate that way. It is very informal. It's really just a list of, I think, 4 questions asking, how long have you studied English? Did you complete the registration form by yourself, or did you get help with that? What is the most challenging part of English for you? Is it speaking, listening, writing, reading? Those are the main questions. I do also have a reading assessment from Confidence and Connections that I can email to students to figure out their specific level with that curriculum as well.
Great. And Gwen, the next question that I have, I think may take a little bit of time to answer. So I'm going to go ahead, and I know it's about 3 minutes till, but I'm going to go ahead and say thank you to everyone who took time out of their day to attend, and to thank you, Gwen and Soyla, for sharing just like great information about what you're doing there in Lubbock, and let folks know you are free to go, but also that Gwen and Soyla have agreed to stay on and make sure everybody's questions are answered. So if you want to stay and listen to their responses to the remaining questions, you're welcome to do that. And like I said, we will send out a follow-up email on Monday that will have a certificate, the PowerPoint, plus links to all of the great resources that were mentioned today. And then look for an email announcing our next webinar on Tuesday or Wednesday. So thank you very much. Now, Gwen, the next question, somebody asked, what do you do to train your volunteers? Like, what kind of training are your volunteers getting? And if it's different for ESL or the folks working with low literacy students, or the folks working with the high school GED students, kind of talk about that.
So I would say what we do with volunteers is, I would call it more of an orientation. So it's talking about an overview of our organization, policies and procedures, our mutual expectations, and then we go through some of the resources that they'll be using in their role. We talk about working with adult learners, our philosophy about that, and the things that are important to us about the way people work with our students. Those are the main things. I really rely on our volunteers to reach out when they need more guidance. So I wouldn't say that we have like a robust training. It's more of an orientation.
And Gwen, we also have remembered about the brown bag share.
Yeah, so that's last fall, I hosted what I called a swap meet with the goal of volunteers coming in and sharing with each other the tools that they like to use and what they find most useful, and strategies that they utilize in class and with one-on-one tutoring. We didn't get to do that this spring, but yeah, really a lot of it is sharing resources, and then we do really rely on volunteers to use discretion and to reach out for help if they're not sure how to meet their students' needs. And then you'll notice, like on our Weebly page, we do have a page for training and development. And so we do always encourage our volunteers, and in my regular communications to volunteers, you know, whenever I see a good webinar or something, then I'll include that link, but that all goes onto the training and development page, so that since we aren't able to provide a lot of training, that they do have access to training.
There is another question for both of you in terms of communication. One of the questions says, what platforms do you use to make the appointments with them? And
I'm sorry, I only heard part of the question. What platform do we use? And then I lost it.
To make appointments with the students.
Oh, okay. So since we are a small program, And because during the crisis, our attendance, especially for GED, went way down. So thus far, I've been able to manage it with people contacting me generally through the Google phone line. And then I make an appointment in my own work calendar. Like I have a separate calendar for that, but it's in my regular workflow. And then I reach out to the tutors directly to confirm that with them. But since I have tutors on an on-call schedule, you know, it should be no shock to them if I make an appointment, because it's going to be within the hours that they've already committed to being available.
And that's true. I've had students who call me on my cell phone and say, if you have a cancellation tomorrow, can you put me in? And I'll text Gwen and say, Gwen, if I have a cancellation, this person wants to come in at that time, and Gwen sends them the link for that, the Zoom link, if I'm available at that time.
Yeah. And so the person asking the question may be asking like what we use as a volunteer management software. And the answer is like I am the software. It's using our regular work tools. We don't have a volunteer management software platform.
No.
We also have some, oops, sorry. We have some questions about Quizlet. So one person is just asking if there's any more information you can provide about using Quizlet, but then a couple of other similar or related topics. One, did you say you are using Quizlet for ESL students? And then another person wants to know in general what type of support, if any, you're offering for your Spanish learners.
Oh, Quizlet, first of all, is free right now, so this is a great time to go and explore all the features that it has to make flashcards for any subject that you want. And it does have it in English and in Spanish. So if you have some Spanish speakers that are trying to learn English and vice versa, it's great for that. And the features that I really like for ESL, I've used it for both for GED and ESL, is the pictures, the visuals that you can add. They give you options of different pictures that you can choose from, the simplified definitions that you can add, and you can go and edit your own or make your own definitions, and then just add anything else you want. And it also provides an auditory icon you can put on the voice, and it'll read the flashcards to them, the definitions to them. So if you have a beginner, it helps them with that.
Yeah, and then I don't know of any of our ESL instructors or tutors who utilize Quizlet. I mean, we definitely let them know it's available, but I don't know of any of my volunteers that are using that. And as far as Spanish learners, I think they probably mean specifically for GED.
Oh yeah. Oh, I'm glad you said that, because we had several students who came in last summer when I was just there, and I had no Spanish materials, and they said, "We're taking the GED. I heard we could take it in Spanish." And I said, "Yes." And they took the practice test in Spanish, but we did not have any Spanish materials. And so I just got on Amazon and I looked and I searched for any GED Spanish materials, and I ordered those. And there are some out there.
A little bit, and on our resource page, you'll also see that we have links to study materials in Spanish. But our numbers are very small. I've only had 2 Spanish learners who have been on my radar recently. We reached out to both of those students during the closures, and neither one of them decided to access our tutoring.
And someone asked how we use Quizlet beyond flashcards. When you go onto that website, you can actually, with the flashcards, you can print out a test using those vocabulary words. You can have a game using those vocabulary cards. And I really like the tests, the quizzes that they designed with the flashcards. It isn't just match, it's fill in the blank, it's match, it's definition. They give you the definition, they have to give you the word, or they'll give you the word and you give the definition. It has a different type of format for the test questions. So you might want to go and explore that.
Great.
And I think,
Go ahead, Gwen.
yeah, I was just going to say too, I think it depends on, you know, what people just like using. And so I think that the flashcard format works really well for people. But a similar website is Quizzes. And that also has, you know, question sets that people have created before, only it's in a more, it's gamified. So it's more like you're playing a game. So that's something you may want to check out if you think that your students would like that format.
Great. And I'll post that Quizzes website in just a second in the chat room, but it's also in that distance learning resources on Education Network. So Gwen, you talked a little bit about this. We have a question from Donna that just says, were you able to maintain your GED population? She says, our testing was closed, so they lost some of their students. They felt like they would kind of forget everything by the time they tested. And so it hurt their motivation. It sounded like you were having a similar experience with your GED or high school equivalency students. And I wondered if you thought, like when you reached out and kind of talked to them and tried to get them into the distance learning, is that what you were hearing? And are you expecting to be able to get them back, or do you have a plan for getting them back as you kind of transition back into regular operations?
So we definitely had a huge drop off, especially I would say the first 3 weeks. We hardly had anyone contacting us at all. Any contact that we had, it was because I was reaching out to them and making lots of phone calls, doing lots of follow-up with people. As far as the reasons that I heard for low attendance, I did have one student who told me specifically, well, they closed a testing site and I don't want to do a whole bunch of studying and not be able to test, because she felt like she wouldn't be able to retain it. So I was encouraging her to do the tutoring with the idea that if she kept studying, that she would actually retain the information. But really, probably the largest obstacles that we heard about, having school kids at home. I have 2 of our GED students who have 5 kids at home. And I mean, I can only imagine. And so they both said, you know, I just can't take on studying or really doing anything for themselves. Those were 2 students who we supported by giving the gift cards to. I thought they could really use that help. So having school kids at home, not just because of the time that their kids take up, but also because they would be sharing devices and internet bandwidth while the kids were trying to get their schoolwork done. A lot of people were having issues connecting to tutoring because everything was just out of routine. So the people who were able to keep their jobs, a lot of them, their schedules had suddenly changed. So everything was just out of whack. And then definitely, I think that the stress of the crisis, some of our students had problems. I had one student who did disclose to me that they were having anxiety and depression, and serious enough that I actually referred him to a social worker and a mental health hotline.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I think it sounds like it's been a traumatic, I think, and just kind of tumultuous situation for everybody, students included. So it sounds like there are multiple factors kind of going into that.
Someone had a question about Quizlet, about being able to upload docs. When you have your set, you can share it through a link. They give you a link a URL link, and you can share that. Also, don't reinvent the wheel. There are so many sets out there already. You can just go and look at them if they've made them public, because some are private, but if they're public, they'll be out there. You just go to the search and say social studies terms or math terms or whatever you need, and you can import those to your account or export and import them free, and so long as they've been made public. So just a tip, don't spend a whole lot of time, go look at what other people have done. I'm always so grateful for our fellow colleagues who are just so willing to share.
There's actually a question. I know you mentioned the average time for GED test takers that are expected to read a passage. What was that time again, the average time?
Oh, well, the GED website said that the average article on a GED test is 500 to 700 words, and it usually takes 1 minute to read. It takes a minute to read 100 words. So if you have 500 words, you should spend 5 minutes reading that. That's typical what they expect. And I have some readers that can't do that, and they worry about it. I'm just too slow. I'm reading too slow, and we have to figure out why.
We've also had some questions about students and how they are accessing the courses. Have you had difficulties with students not having the resources, computers? Are your students using their phones to get in? How are you addressing if they have limited minutes? So if you could just talk again or a little bit more about how you're addressing the needs of students, or maybe your student population, was well set up for this.
Sure. As far as our ESL and GED students, I would say most of them, almost all of them, have at least a smartphone. So they have been able to connect with the email and video meeting that way. I had a student who had a smartphone and had intermittent internet service, but she was not going to be able to do video, and she could not even set up phone appointments because she didn't have enough money to pay for her phone that month. So with her, it was communicating with her by email because she did have some email access. And I ended up taking a book to her to work through. And I have another student who has been homeless. I would still say currently he's homeless, but he's in a slightly better situation now than he was 3 weeks ago. So he had intermittent access as well as some other issues. He's a student that we set up with a tutor. They had a couple of tutoring sessions just by voice phone. So that worked with them. Since then, he has gotten to a slightly more stable situation where he is able to have internet, and he accesses the video tutoring on his phone. I'm sure there are students who we aren't in contact with because of the access to technology, and that's something that in our contingency planning that we need to figure out how we can make sure that that we're reaching students and that they know how to access our services.
Great. We had a few questions, so I'll just kind of ask these right in a row, but a few questions about different resources. So one person asked, do you ever recommend the National External Diploma Program instead of the GED?
So the only high school equivalency program that we recommend to students is the GED, and that's because we have a GED testing site in Lubbock. And that's as far as I know historically what our organization has done.
Also, that's the one that's approved by our Texas Education Agency.
Well, yeah, there's two. So Texas actually also accepts the HiSET test, but we don't have a testing location in Lubbock. So it doesn't make a lot of sense for us to recommend that.
Right, right. Another question, did you use the free KET materials during the other times, or, you know, like when your courses were operating regularly, or is it just something you started using now that you're online and kind of using during the free time?
We didn't use it beforehand.
You didn't use it beforehand.
Free.
Perfect. And then last question about materials is, you guys mentioned Coursera, I think, that you recommend some Coursera courses for ESL students, or maybe it was listed in your student resources section of your website. Can you talk about which Coursera courses you use?
So it's listed on our Weebly site as a resource for people who want to do an online course. That is not something that we normally recommend because it does usually have a fee associated with it. So it is one of the links that that we put on the student pages as we were creating them and looking for free material for students. If you were to follow that link, it takes you to courses that are for English as a second language. So I would not say that we recommend particular courses. What we're doing with that link is just saying, hey, this is available if you want to check it out.
Perfect. Thank you.
Just a quick question. What was that link again? The Weebly site that you mentioned, LL resources. I think they...
Sure, I can actually back up here so we can look at it. There we go.
Perfect, thank you.
Can you remind us, you may have mentioned this already, but if not, how many students are in your online classes?
So using our online services right now, I always am careful not to use the word classes, since what we do really is more remote tutoring. I mean, numbers are way down right now. So I would say in a given week, we have, I actually think I wrote this down. Yeah, so typically pre-crisis, in a normal week for ESL, we would have 40 or more students in a week. Right now, regularly, we have only about 10. So we're only at about 25%. And in our GED, any given week, actually coming to tutoring, so not necessarily doing other things like practice testing, but really coming to our drop-in tutoring, it's about 15 students per week. And right now we're at about 7. So about half attendance as usual. So we are a small program, and that's why we're able to be nimble in some ways.
We had a question about, do you do anything that focuses on family literacy? And if so, what books or resources do you use?
So we promote family literacy through events. So we have our regular story times that we do with libraries and with a local nonprofit daycare. We have events that we call Books for Breakfast. Those are events that we run with other nonprofit partners where clients that they work with will come in with their children, and we do a story time and crafts and snacks and everything to with the idea of making reading a really fun thing to do, and also showing parents how important reading with their children is, and modeling how to read with their child. And then besides those events, we have other events that come up, like with Barnes and Noble, we do an annual Polar Express event that's at the bookstore. We read Polar Express and have all sorts of arts and crafts activities around that story. So what we do is event-based with family literacy.
About how Elizabeth has been.
Yes. So during the closure, and I'll say with our story times, one of the main things that makes it different from a regular story time is that each family will get a copy of the book at the end of story time, because we want to make sure not only that children are learning to love reading, but that we're also building their libraries at home. So when everything closed up, for I think a week, maybe 2 weeks, I made some book deliveries to the daycare that we work with. When we determined that wasn't really safe anymore, I stopped that, but my colleague then went online to our Facebook and gave families the opportunity to sign up for a book packet. So it has some books, some other activities to do. So it's a whole packet. And she has made 2 sets of deliveries of those, and it was no small feat. I mean, that was, I actually don't know the exact number that she did in the first run, but I believe the second run was at least 60, if not 70 families. So we still are making an effort to get books out to families. And those are children's books that come from different places. I mean, it's generally where we can find a good sale. So a lot of times it comes from Scholastic Publishing, but there are other places that we buy books from as well.
Okay, perfect. We've got a couple of more questions and then we will let you guys go. So one question is, I forget how many, you said some of your students were like very low kind of literacy level students. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so have you noticed a difference between working with them and the higher level students in terms of their, like the amount of time it takes, how engaging you can make the lessons, the distance learning? Are they more or less open to distance learning? Just kind of how does your experience with those very beginning level students compare to other students? What kind of support have you found that they needed?
Well, I really enjoyed that. We have breakout rooms, and if I'm with a student who's at a much lower level and I work with her one-on-one, I think she feels really confident. She's my lowest reader, but when it's just she and I, she feels better than being in a class, being in our site center where there's more than one person there. I think that's been beneficial to make her feel more confident that, you know, I don't read very well, but it's just me and you, and we're just going to work together. Then with the other students, we can go faster, and I can meet with a couple of students that are at the same level and go pretty fast.
Yeah. And then the last question is about your ESL students. And did you say that you are working both one-on-one, and I know you said you have like a conversation group that was a drop-in group for ESL students, but did you say you're also working with them one-on-one?
So yes, we do have ESL students in one-on-one tutoring. That is not on a drop-in basis. Those are students who responded to our communications, taking us up on the offer to do tutoring, and then I match them with a tutor so that they work with the same tutor over time.
Okay. And do you find that Do you find that there's a difference in how ESL students like work or progress in a one-on-one situation versus a group?
I'm not sure that I would have the numbers to make any sort of suggestions about trends. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, that's fine. That's totally.
Yeah. So I think our numbers are small enough that it's just so individual.
Mm-hmm.
And really depends on how much time the student is able to put into studying. And just to clarify as well, just because our students are doing one-on-one tutoring doesn't mean that that's all they're doing. So,
right.
So they may also be in a class, and they may also be attending our conversation groups.
Okay. That makes absolute sense. All right, Gwen, Soyla, that is the end of our questions. Thank you guys again so much for your time today in a great presentation and answering people's questions and providing us with a lot of great resources and teaching tips, and then for sticking around and being willing to answer everybody's questions, make sure all the questions got answered. So again, for those people that stuck around, we'll send out an email on Monday that'll have a link to the recording and the PowerPoint slideshow and a list of resources that were mentioned and things like that. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending. Have a great weekend. Gwen and Soyla, thank you again. Have a great weekend.
Be safe.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.